one more Fantano video. He's got entitled "The Worst Music Take," so it kind of piqued my interest, caught my eye. I don't know exactly who he's talking about or what the take is, because there's a lot of really fucking bad music takes out there, and somebody that is kind of as well known as he is, especially in music, to say this is the worst music take, I gotta see, because I'm sure he's gotten a lot of fucking horrible takes. But let's check this out. On the cover of it, he's got Adam Carolla, if you don't know who that is, kind of famed 90s, early 2000s comedian who hasn't quite aged the best socially. But let's check this out. Let's see what all the fuss is about.
Hey everyone, Bethany Take Tano here, the internet's most opinionated opinion guy, reacting to opinions. I'll be honest, when it comes to music opinions these days, especially on the internet, I've been feeling pretty numb lately. Seems like every take I run across these days is just the same. However, there was recently delivered unto me by the algorithm gods something truly, freshly stupid and ignorant. And this is a take from comedian, podcast host, social commentator, Mr. Adam Carolla, where he had some not so nice words to say about someone who many consider to be one of the greatest songwriters of all time.
I hate Lou Reed.
Okay, good.
This is why I'm really angry about Lou Reed. Lou Reed is a subpar musician, poser, attitude guy who possesses no musical discernible talent.
You just summed him up in one word.
100% poser.
Poser.
He's a talentless poser.
Okay,
Well, that's a take. That's definitely a take. I won't say here and act like I'm the biggest Lou Reed fan or know all his music, but I'm definitely fully aware of him, and I'm definitely fully aware of his impact on music and the culture, and like especially rock music, and like just his band, the fucking Velvet Underground, and the impact that they've had. So to have an opinion about somebody like that who's had that much of an impact, who's been that kind of influential, who's had that amount of success within a genre like that, and to come fully out there and say like he's a complete poser and a hack completely is like, well, that's definitely a take. That's definitely a take.
this is why Adam is angry about Lou Reed. He's a subpar musician. He's a poser, and he possesses no discernible talent. Again, all of which is like confusing to me, but I mean, I guess I understand where Adam or this type of comedic riffing is coming from. It comes from a place where it's only funny when you have a complete and utter lack of knowledge of the thing that you're talking about. And unfortunately, as popular as Lou Reed is,
and it's funny, it's like a lot of these takes that come from, people from different, mediums, different cultural aspects, like a comedian talking about music, or a musician, or a comedian talking about sports or whatever. It's like a lot of times when come these type of takes is obviously one, clickbait and getting engagement, but two, it's simply, and a lot of times it comes from people that are in their own fields, fucking average to below average themselves, who's had a career that they can only wish was as successful as the people they're talking about. It always comes from those type of people. It never really comes from the people who have made it, who have reached the highest of heights, but it comes from them. Like for somebody like that to come fully out like that, like, damn, okay.
Is like, you've really got to be tuned into his career and his trajectory and the Velvet Underground in order to actually understand where he's coming from artistically and creatively. And if you only have a surface level understanding of all of that, I get how you could come away thinking like, oh, this is just like some pretentious art bullshit. Again, no musical discernible talent, despite the fact that prior to Lou Reed's solo career, prior to the Velvet Underground, like he was a working songwriter as well as a session musician. I mean, that's not like really a gig that you tend to get if musically speaking, you're totally garbage and you have no discernible talent. Now, yes, it is true that a lot of Lou Reed songs, and especially like, those early and classic Velvet Underground recordings, do have a lot of very raw and messy and sort of improvised playing on them that can sound like kind of chaotic to the untrained ear. But like when you understand the man's artistic vision and how widely impactful it was on a lot of popular music across the board, you sort of see and understand the intent behind all of that. And that's essentially, one of many things that made Lou's early work and the Velvet Underground, when they came out of the gate, genuinely subversive in the wider world of music.
Not to mention their first album, Velvet Underground and Nico, is honestly one of the most iconic albums from that period. It is widely considered one of the most influential works of art from that period, and like on a lot of the music that I've come to follow, in terms of combining pop and rock and art rock and all these different kind of aspects. Like if you listed 100 greatest albums of all time, a lot of people would have that within that list at some point. And this extremely long and varied and deep history of music that we have now, for any of your project to be considered on that level should be more than enough to not be considered a fucking hack. I'm just going to say that.
And while, yeah, sure, it is true, there is validity to the view that Lou Reed, attitude guy, maybe somebody who people read as a poser, because when you see him on his album covers, in pictures, in interviews, he's like there looking cool. He's the ultimate 60s art rock cool guy who nobody can be cooler than. And yeah, it is true, Lou Reed did kind of give off that vibe in the way that he presented himself to the public. Simultaneously, I would argue that the man had a reason to have a bit of a chip on his shoulder, given just how genuinely strange and left field the music he was making at the time was. Like before that original Velvet Underground and Nico record came out, it was rejected by multiple labels. There are experiments and sounds on that record for rock and roll's time period were genuinely avant-garde. And in fact, there are tracks on the following VU album, White Light, White Heat, that are actually even more out there. They were making genuinely challenging, game-changing art, and while yes, they did have the support of big and influential figures like Andy Warhol at the time, they were doing it mostly for themselves, given that it would take years for Lou Reed to actually reach any kind of mainstream success.
Which is, again, another point I was going to make is like, yes, you know him now, but even when he was like making these super now influential works of art and things that have clearly stood the test of time and are still, in people's conversations, they weren't even that big. They weren't even like super successful and blowing up and like being put on stages and on TV shows and all that. They were very fucking underground. They were very artsy. They're very, as you would put it, pretentious, but they were the ones that were creating the most interesting stuff at the time. They were creating interesting sounds and combinations. They were creating a new direction for artists that, coming from them in the future that, you couldn't even predict. People were listening to them, like a lot of young people were listening to them that got inspired and influenced by them, and which created a whole new wave and style of music that was built upon that foundation. And that is what you need in music. Yes, not every kind of artist that has a super influential, impactful, noteworthy work of art or song or music or project is truly as good or as, as he says it, like as up to snuff as, some other people from their field, but that the fact that they are able to be as influential and as impactful despite that should even prove just how good they truly are. Like, yes, they might have shortcomings from a technical aspect or might not be as good as, the general consensus, but nobody ever is. But a lot of other people don't have quite the impact or influence as, said artists have. And I think that says a lot about them regardless. So like, yeah, I think this is kind of a crazy fucking take.
All of this widespread industry success and love that Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground enjoy today, like that would actually take years and years and years to build up. Also, I love echoing that Lou Reed is a poser while wearing a Jane's Addiction shirt.
If you talk to anybody from
crazy stray to Jane's Addiction, but warranted because you have no room to talk shit if that is what you're wearing.
Rolling Stone magazine. They love Lou Reed.
And I actually do love Jane's Addiction, but let's be real. Like, come on.
Every music critic has to mention Lou Reed. If you ask them who your favorites are, it's Lou Reed, blah, blah, blah,
Lou Reed,
Radiohead.
Transformer, top 20.
I mean, first off, while it is true that Rolling Stone has spilled a lot of ink praising the music of Lou Reed, the magazine isn't exactly like, I don't know, blindly in love with everything he's ever done. And on top of it, yes, Lou Reed does have a lot of critical acclaim, but I feel like Adam is kind of misunderstanding like the cycle here and the way the music discourse kind of,
you know, I'm gonna put this in turn for like a lot of people that may not know Lou Reed or rock or like kind of just the genre as a whole. Like, this conversation has a lot, you know, to do with me, like, and hip hop. It reminds me a lot of like the conversation that surrounds an artist like a Nas, or like, even as you mentioned before, like Earl Sweatshirt, or, you know, people of that ilk who, I wouldn't even say Nas, because Nas, yes, he does get a lot of critical acclaim, but he does have a lot of commercial success as well, and he does have all these moments. What I will say, somebody like an Earl Sweatshirt, somebody like a Lupe Fiasco, somebody like that who's have clear influence and impact on the genre, whether you know it or not, who has really changed the way that a lot of people do things within the genre, or like the styles and approaches that they have. And yes, they might have had some commercial success later on in their career. They weren't necessarily the biggest artists when they were out, but they did have an impact, and they do get a lot of critical acclaim, and their fans are diehard fans who will advocate for them on any and every basis. And you will see their name being put up in a lot of lists from a critical standpoint, because from a critical standpoint, they are exceptional. They do put out some very thought-provoking, challenging music that stands the test of time, but from a commercial aspect, they might not necessarily have that same kind of impact or crossover. And for listeners or fans who might not, you know, understand them or get what they're doing or appreciate what they're doing quite as much, it can get a bit tiring and grating. And you can think like, why are so many people singing their praises when I barely even know their shit? Like, I haven't heard a single song of them. Like, that is the conversation a lot that surrounds artists like Earl Sweatshirt, a Lupe, and other people like that. But that doesn't diminish the influence or the impact that they've had. If you know what I'm saying, this is the conversation that like is very much like attributable when it comes to me, like when it comes to like hip hop and other genres and artists like that.
Like, it works, the way it flows. Like, it's the music critic's job, yes, to praise and be critical of the things that we are talking about. But simultaneously, on top of that, it's also vital to contextualize the things that we are talking about. Lou Reed often gets mentioned in reviews, in top 10 lists, because his songs and his ideas and his creativity are essentially the lifeblood for a lot of albums that drop even today. There are still loads of punk records and avant-garde records and singer-songwriter records and indie records that are just oozing with Lou Reed influence. This isn't just some paradigm that was forced after the fact, with decades and decades of critics just shoving Lou Reed down the throats of music fans and musicians until it finally took. Lou Reed was in fact beloved by his contemporaries, Brian Eno, who's one of the greatest minds in music. I don't know, Metallica, who were willing to put their entire career and public perception on the line to collaborate with this man and make what pretty much all their fans think is their worst record. So like, the praise that you see for Lou Reed isn't just like some kind of irrational dogma that critics are sort of like forcing people into. Oh, if you say you don't like Lou Reed in the Rolling Stone office, they fire you. Oh no.
And this is the conversation that, you know, also can be applied to like Kendrick Lamar right now. Like, you know, even before the Drake whole thing, like, a lot of people questioned why people love Kendrick Lamar so much, why he's in conversations, why like, we're downplaying his impact, influence on the game, and, you know, just his kind of like his spot in a lot of critical lists, and why a lot of critics out there placed him so highly and regard him as highly as they did. You can argue with, you know, the music, and because music is subjective, and whether you like it or not, whether it's as good as people say it is, but you cannot argue against impact and influence when you can clearly point out somebody like Lou Reed's impact and influence so clearly in artists that have followed him, and not only their interviews and their direct attribution to him, but in their actual music and songs that clearly pulls from stylings and choices and things that he did in his music, you cannot argue against that in terms of impact and influence, which, you know, can rub people the wrong way.
If you walked in to Rolling Stone magazine's office and go, I don't really like Lou Reed, you'd be fired. You'd be fired. There's two bands that they cannot say anything. Yeah. Well, Radiohead, they cannot say anything bad about. Lou Reed, they have to worship at the altar of Lou Reed and the Beastie Boys.
I like how for Adam, this is also like becoming
Beastie Boys out here taking a stray.
What?
Like, why is he taking a stray at Beastie Boy? Like, I mean, I get it. Like, I kind of get it because I don't think Beasties are quite as good as some people I put them, but like their impact, influence on the genre and just how big they became and like how much they did to drive forward hip hop and to make it as mainstream as it was and to reach new audiences and to create different sounds that people can like run off of and kind of like show that there's different ways to do hip hop. Like, that's undeniable. You might not love all their music. You might not think their music as great as some people do, because I'm in that boat. I do like their music. I do think they have a lot of great songs, but I don't necessarily hold them quietly as high as esteem as some people would. But you cannot deny their impact. You cannot deny their influence.
An anti-Beastie Boys agenda too. What does Adam have against the Beastie Boys? They're one of the least pretentious music groups out there. They just make fun, crazy music. Something you would think someone of Adam's intelligence level could grasp, but maybe the guy doesn't like fun either. He hates artists who are cool and have an attitude and are, a little reserved, and he hates artists who are having fun. Got it.
And I'm like, they both suck. And they're like, what? All of them, universally. And I'm like, first off, you don't even like Lou Reed. And then I tell these people, bring in a good Lou Reed song.
Okay, bring in a good Lou Reed song. For one, I know Adam knows Sweet Jane. Apparently, he's acknowledged on the internet that he enjoys that song. Okay, Sweet Jane, Walk on the Wild Side, Perfect Day, Pale Blue Eyes, Sunday Morning, Waiting for the Man, Who Loves the Sun, I'll Be Your Mirror is one of the greatest love songs of all time, Candy Says. And look, a lot of these tracks are just the tip of the iceberg of Lou's catalog, and they're honestly some of his most just kind of regular and broadly enjoyable songs. Like, obviously, if I were talking to Adam, I'm not going to say to this guy like, oh yeah, one of the greatest songs of all time is Sister Ray. But like any normal man with working ears should be able to hear the song Pale Blue Eyes and be like, yeah, that's a really pretty, endearing, beautiful, moving song. But instead of acknowledging that, he's just being a hater so that people pay attention to him, because he actually lacks the talent and creativity that he feels like Lou Reed shouldn't be acting so cool about. What has Adam contributed to the creative meta outside of like The Man Show, a dog shit comedy program that even his former collaborator Jimmy Kimmel is too embarrassed to acknowledge most of the time? We also have Mr. Burcham, possibly the greatest animated show of all time.
You bring
in Walk on the Wild Side.
Right. Okay. That's one song from 46 years ago. Like, give me his catalog. Tell me how good Lou Reed. Give me another good Lou Reed song. They never can do it. They can't do it.
I mean, that's also driving home the point where I said, like, it's always the people who have not reached the same heights of success as somebody else in their own field, and they feel like, they feel slighted. They feel, I say they feel a lot of weight. They feel bitter simply for the fact that they aren't nearly as successful as said person that they're talking about in their own field, and this is a way for them to kind of lash out and get back.
Because he's talentless.
He's a poser. I've never heard him described as a poser before.
He's a poser, 100%.
I've never heard him described as a poser before. Because you're talking to somebody dumb enough to say that. That's why. That's why you're hearing that for the first time.
Such a poser. He made people think he's the anti-poser. And the opposite end of that is, I'd say, bring me a bad David Bowie song.
If you walked into Rolling Stone magazine and you lined up every critic and you said, you have to pick one, you can't have both. Either Lou Reed was never born or David Bowie was never born. They'd go, ooh, that is vexing.
Yeah, I mean, the most obvious answer to "ooh, that is vexing" is they're both highly influential musicians. There's so much in modern music you would be completely deleting were you to get rid of either of those two artists. But on top of it, what makes this dichotomy even more hilarious is David Bowie loved Lou Reed, collaborated with Lou multiple times, actually, produced the record that Walk on the Wild Side is off of, and was an early adopter of Lou Reed's stuff through the Velvet Underground before, the band and Lou had really gotten all that popular. So like at the time that David Bowie was collaborating and working with Lou, there was like, no commercial pressure like, oh, you got to work with this Lou Reed guy. He's just too big. He's too popular. He's too cool. You have to do something with him. Like he could have easily said, yeah, this guy is a pioneer and he's inspired me, but like, who cares? Like, I'm bigger than him at this point. I don't need to work with this fucker. But he did anyway, because he's an actual musician with actual taste and actually is an appreciator of art, and saw something in Lou Reed that apparently these guys can't, because he knows what he's doing.
It's like the one guy's a chain-smoking poser, drug addict, fucking doofus who sucked, but you guys are all nerds and you want to suck his cock.
Okay, like, I can't think of anything more fucking nerdy than whining on a podcast about Lou Reed, but there's that. But also, like, what is this delineation between Bowie and Lou here? Like,
I mean, it's very obvious rage bait, and he got his reaction. He got his reactions from it. He got people commenting on it. Like, he got what he wanted. Will that get me to watch That Carolla? No, but it did what it was supposed to do, and it created controversy and conversation, which we kind of talked about earlier. Is trolling is the new form of engagement, and that just seems to be the way it is, and it's a bit sickening and a bit tiring, but it is what it is.